Please welcome Trevor Louden.
Hi, thanks very much. It's great to speak again. G'day, mate. How are you going? There's a few Kiwis here, are there? Look, I want to carry on with my theme of this morning. The reason I'm here is because I see the big issue with the United States is your defences. While you're all focused on your economic, Mr. Obama and Leon Panetta are gutting your military. And there's no coming back from that, because if you think the Russians and the Chinese and the Cubans and the Iranians are going to sit on their hands when you drop your defences, I think you're dreaming. You know, nobody else in the world thinks they'll do that. So I want to talk a little bit about smiling Leon himself, Mr. Panetta. Your Secretary of Defence, the man voted 100-0 through your US Senate, very well liked on both sides of the aisle, and the man who got Osama bin Laden. But what is he doing? What is he doing? What's his background? He's sitting at your Defence Department right now, presiding over the biggest cuts in your military in your history. At a time where Europe is on the verge of implosion, when China is building a blue water navy, when Russia is increasingly aggressive, when Iran is on the verge of nuclear Armageddon in the Middle East, this is the time to cut your military? Is it? No. It's not, but that's where it's heading. And, you know, they talk about it in the Bible, you know, they cry peace when there is no peace. Obama is talking peace, but where he is taking this country is war, and war that you may not win. So I want to talk a little bit about smiling Leon himself. Leon Panetta was for several years a congressman out of Santa Cruz in California. Now, the Santa Cruz, California Democrat Party is not the same as the Iowa Democrat Party or the Missouri Democrat Party. It is a hard left, lunatic fringe, nutcase, California Communist Democrat Party. A little bit like your Oregon Democrat Party. It is really hardcore left. Leon Panetta had members of a Marxist group, Democratic Socialists of America, on his campaign committees. He worked with Marxists his entire time. Leon Panetta campaigned, along with the Communist Party USA, to get Leonard Peltier out of jail. Leonard Peltier was an American Indian activist in the Dakotas who murdered in cold blood 2 FBI agents, and Leon Panetta tried to get him out of jail. Leon Panetta was known throughout his time in Congress as an opponent of Star Wars, as an opponent of the US military, as a massive opponent of Reagan's policy of containing communism in Latin America. He was a far-left Democrat. But Leon Panetta also had a little buddy in Santa Cruz. Leon and Sylvia Panetta were best friends with Hugh and Dorothy DeLacy. And the two couples would go to parties at each other's houses, and they were best friends for about 9 or 10 years. And when Hugh DeLacy died in 1986, Leon Panetta read the eulogy to him at the funeral, at the memorial service, alongside 3 members of the Marxist group Democratic Socialists of America. Leon Panetta and Hugh DeLacy shared a series of correspondence for more than 9 years, which I have, all of which were dealing with how terrible Reagan was for opposing communism in Latin America, how the US military had to be cut, and how terrible the US military-industrial complex was. Completely anti-military in tone. Completely. But Leon Panetta's little friend Hugh DeLacy had a history. And while he was corresponding with Mr. Panetta, he was also going down to Nicaragua to visit with those communist Sandinistas, and he was going to Spain to visit with the Spanish Communist Party. And that's not surprising, because back in the 1940s, Hugh DeLacy had been a Democrat congressman out of Washington State. And that was the time they used to talk about the 47 states of the Union and the Soviet of Washington. And Leon Hugh de Lacy spent most of his time in Congress advocating that the United States should abandon support for Chiang Kai-shek's pro-American nationalist Chinese forces in China and throw their support to Mao Zedong's communist Chinese forces. And when the United States did that, the communists took over China, and we had the result. We had the result we're still feeling the implications of today. And it's not surprising that Hugh de Lacy was doing that, because all the time he was in Congress and right up to the 1970s, he was a secret card-carrying member of the Communist Party USA. And that is not me saying that, that's a generally acknowledged historical fact. So your Mr. Panetta was best friends with a long-term secret communist. Now, the devil looks after its own. In 1975, Leon Panetta hooked up with an old friend, a Stanford University academic called John Stewart Service. And John Stewart Service arranged for Hugh de Lacy and Dorothy de Lacy to get a months-long trip to China, care of the Chinese Communist Party. Interestingly, John Stewart Service had been in the 1940s a member of the Amerasia Soviet spy ring, who had worked with your State Department to deliver China to the communists. So Hugh de Lacy and Dorothy de Lacy go to China. They were there for a month. They visited the collective farms and the factories and whatever. But they also had time to visit with two American expatriates living there. One was a guy called Frank Coe, who was then working as a propagandist for the Communist Chinese government. Frank Coe was a former member of the Soviet Amerasia spy ring. The other man they visited with was a guy called Solomon Adler. Solomon Adler was another former member of the Amerasia Soviet spy ring, and at that time was working as a serving advisor to the Chinese intelligence services. So he was a live Chinese spy when Hugh de Lacy was visiting him. Back in the United States, Hugh de Lacy was also corresponding, and I have the letters, with a Washington state communist called Don Wheeler, who had in the 1940s was a member of the Soviet KGB's Silver Master spy ring in Washington, D.C. He was also corresponding with a man called Victor Perlo out of Connecticut, another leading communist, another former member of the Silver Master KGB spy ring of the 1940s. So Mr. de Lacy, who is best friends with your Secretary of Defense, was in contact with 4 former Soviet spies, one of whom was a live Chinese agent. Now I ask you, where's the nearest military base to here? Anybody know? Okay, Washington State. Well, if Mr. Panetta, when he retires from his job, applies for a job as a janitor at that base, and the FBI does the routine security checks on his background, how do you think he'll go? He won't get it, and neither would Mr. Obama. But both of those men are basically deciding the military fate of your country. And you think about why the Soviets have been funding the peace movement in this country for decades, why the Russians have been supporting the peace activists in this country, because they know that your military is the only thing standing between them and what they want, which is world domination. Now, Leon Panetta, Hugh de Lacy, Leon Panetta's best friend, was also acting as the West Coast agent for a little publication out of Chicago called In These Times, a Marxist journal. In These Times was run by a man called James Weinstein, former Communist Party member, founder of Democratic Socialists of America, and reportedly peripherally involved in the Rosenberg spy ring of the 1940s, the people who gave Stalin the A-bomb secrets. In 2002, James Weinstein and a whole bunch of Chicago communists got together to set up a big anti-Iraq war rally in Federal Plaza in downtown Chicago. And that rally was where a certain Illinois politician made his name nationwide as an opponent of the Iraq war. And guess who that politician was? Mr. Barack Hussein Obama. So basically, Barack Obama didn't make a movement made Barack Obama. And elements of that movement do not owe allegiance to your country. And they are busily working away to cut your military to the point you can no longer defend yourselves or your allies. That is the agenda of the left. That is where they're taking this country. So I just want to say to you folks, be on guard, because while you're all looking at the economic issues, and I don't blame you, things are tough out there, keep an eye on your military. It's being hollowed out as you speak. The gay policy in the military is sending thousands of good officers out of the military. They're disgusted with having to serve in those kind of conditions. The morale in the military is going down. The actual hardware is being cut, and you're going to come to a point, you're going to wake up, and there ain't going to be nothing left worth speaking of. That is what you have to watch out more than anything else. And I've got a selfish reason for saying that, because I live in a little country down in the South Pacific that is only free because your 7th Fleet patrols that region. The Chinese will be in there like Flynn the minute they pull out, you know. And you guys have saved our bacon before in World War II. You've kept us free ever since, though we haven't always been grateful. But our freedom depends on you, as does Australia's, as does Canada's, as does Europe's, as does Israel's, as does South Korea's, as does Japan's, and as does Korea's, and Taiwan's. So we're all depending on you guys, and we're depending on your military, and you guys restoring your republic and keeping your defences strong. And I will say about Mr. Romney, Mr. President Obama was caught off mic speaking to the Russian president a few months ago. When I get re-elected, I'll have more flexibility to deal with you. When he was caught doing that, Mr. Romney got out and said, Russia is this country's #1 geopolitical foe. And he was damn well right. And I haven't heard that since Reagan, so I've got to give a lot of credit to Mr. Romney for saying that. So that's one reason to vote for him, if nothing else. So I just want to say to you folks, it's a real honour to be here amongst patriots, because we look, you know, you're not alone. There are millions of people around the world who love America and love what America stands for. Don't believe the left-wing media. It's the same in my country as it is in your country. We love America. There are freedom lovers in every country of the world who love America and look to your constitution for inspiration. We want that for us. And we're only going to get that for us if you guys keep your republic and restore your republic here. So we're rooting for you, believe you me. So it's great to be here. It's great, you know, if you told me 5 years ago there'd be gatherings of patriots like this all over the country, I would have laughed. But Barack Obama has done this country a great favour in many ways. He's woken a sleeping tiger. He doesn't know what he's done. And he's going to regret what he's done. He overplayed his hand big time. He didn't expect you guys to stand up like you did. So I just want to say thank you very, very much. You're on the right track. You're changing the face of this country in the county commissions and the school boards and the state legislatures and the House of Congress and the Senate all over this country. And what you're doing today is going to reverberate for decades and hundreds of years. You are in the second American Revolution. So keep at it, stick at it, keep the faith. Thank you very much for what you're doing, and God bless America. Thank you.
We have a couple of minutes for questions for Trevor.
How does Homeland Security play into this scheme? Well, Homeland Security is basically a centralisation of the intelligence agencies all over this country. And a lot of people regard that as a big mistake because it centralised these bureaucracies and, you know, stopped the local intelligence gathering and that was once very effective in this country. And Homeland Security, although it's doing a good job in some issues, is a big bureaucracy. I think it should be re-decentralised effectively because it will become the new KGB of Obama if he is re-elected. So you do not increase government power any more than you have to, and that's a very dangerous. There's good sides to it, but there's a very dangerous side to it as well. Okay, well, there's a lot I like about Ron Paul. His constitutional stuff, his fiscal stuff is superb. But Ron Paul has come under the influence of the left on foreign policy, I'm afraid. And some people who support him may not like to hear that. He commissioned a paper in 2010 on defence cuts. And that was commissioned with Barney Frank, who has got an FBI record like you wouldn't believe. And they commissioned the Massachusetts Institute to write that defence cuts policy. And sure enough, it recommended huge defence cuts. The Massachusetts Institute is controlled by Democratic Socialists of America. It's a Marxist group. And Ron Paul is promoting a Marxist defence policy. So look, this is not 1776 anymore. You're not worried about Chinese junks coming across the Pacific and Spanish galleons coming across the Atlantic. This is a world where you need bases everywhere to monitor your enemies. It doesn't mean you have to be the policeman of the world, but you have to have eyes and ears everywhere. This is a geopolitical struggle. The Russians, the Chinese, and the Iranians are not separate threats. They are all allied in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is bigger and stronger than the Warsaw Pact ever was. If you don't believe me, Google it tomorrow. We don't even hear about it in the news media. These countries are allies, and they're allied more than anything else by their hatred of this country. So America faces some big geopolitical threats, and you need to keep your guard up. There's a lot of things you can cut in your government, and I know there's waste in the military, and it should be tackled. But your military is 6% of GDP, 20% of federal spending. I would suggest there's a lot more productive cuts to be made than tackling your military. Because your military has saved you before, it will save you again, and being very selfish, it's looking after me.
The other night at 9/12, I was kind of feeling a little discouraged because we weren't getting enough feet on the street, and you said something that encouraged me. You said the revolution and the 40%, the 40%, and the 20%. Would you repeat that for this crowd, please?
Well, you look back, 1773, 40% of the country didn't care, 40% was pro-Tory, and less than 20%, maybe 10 or 15%, had any support for any kind of break with Europe, with Britain. But it was a few people, a very small vanguard of patriots who cared about religious liberty, who cared about freedom, decided that a break with Britain had to be made to found a republic, a free republic, the first in history, the first real one in history. And it was those people, a bunch of farmers and shopkeepers and, seamstresses and lawyers, they got together, united by an idea, against all public opposition and apathy, and started the process that led to the founding of your republic. And they faced public apathy, they faced people who didn't care. When they won the revolution, everybody was a revolutionary. But not at the time. And this is the course of history. You people are the new revolutionaries. You're facing the apathy your friends faced back then, your ancestors faced back then. But you've got the internet now. You've got millions of people on your side, and you've got a lot of people now who know what the Constitution is. So restoring a republic is easier than starting one. Okay? Starting one that's never been done before. It has been done before here. You just have to do it again. So you get out and you do it. You will prevail and you will refound your republic. And in 200 years' time, people will be looking at you guys as the second American revolutionaries. And you will be the heroes that you look back on today.
I would like to bring back Ron Paul in the military. He gets more donations from the military than Obama and Romney and the rest of the candidates put together. And we've been at war for over 10 years now. We haven't won one yet. I believe that Ron Paul is probably the strongest person in the military. It's just he doesn't want to go around creating wars everywhere without a purpose.
Yeah, well, look, there's some truth. Look, okay, Ron Paul has said that that he doesn't think Russia is a threat. He doesn't think Iran is a threat, and they are. But I'll answer that. Look, if I was the king of America, or like Obama wants to be, I would start a war. I would go in, I would take the bad guys out, and I'd be out. And I'd say, you come back, we'll come back 5 times stronger. But I wouldn't be doing these 5-year, 10-year, building, democracy, building things in the Middle East. I'm not here to dictate American foreign policy. I'm not privy to the intelligence that George Bush had or whatever. I don't know why these decisions are right or wrong. But I do know if you don't think you should keep your military strong, if there's anybody here who doesn't think that, I challenge you to put a great big yard sign out in your yard tonight saying, we keep lots of cash and jewellery on our premises and we've got no telephone and no means of communication and we never lock our doors. And you tell me how long you last. Because you are sitting on the biggest treasure house in the world. You're sitting on the greatest wealth in the world. You're sitting on the greatest wealth of the world, and there's a lot of bad guys out there who want to take it out.
One of the concerns, we've been working as a family on bringing the Constitution back to recognition and having groups and studying it. One of the things that I think has concerned us the most, I think this group here, and even like a younger group, they have that sense of patriotism and realization of what we need to do to keep our Constitution strong and not let it be eroded. But my concern is that with the youth, we're having it in the educational system and roundabout, there does not seem to be enough educating or bringing to realization the youth on up through even college, where they're concerned anymore about the Constitution of the United States, which is the foundation of our freedom. And so that is my concern. What suggestions do you have?
Okay, and that's a very valid concern. And I will say, if the Obama agenda had gone on forward in 20 years' time, they would have won. Because there are enough people here, 40, 50, 60 up, who remember your Constitution, who've served in your military, who've done civics courses in high school, and know what this republic is all about. And the lady is quite right. There are so many millions of young people under the age of 40 who have no idea. So that is a responsibility of your generation to educate the young in the Constitution and American exceptionalism. And that is why it's so important to be doing what you're doing, taking the school boards back, getting the right textbooks into the schools and that sort of thing, homeschooling. Look, there's no easy answer to that. There's a lost generation out there, but they're not all lost. But this is where the seniors come in, and I classify myself in that range. Because you guys, look, if they'd done it in 20 years, a lot of you guys wouldn't be here anymore. And the new generation would have just rolled over, because they would have known no better. They got in a bit too early, they overplayed their hand, and new people stood up. But it's incumbent upon you people. Look, if you told me 5 years ago there'd be millions of people around this country discussing the Constitution and the Federalist Papers and American exceptionalism, I would have laughed at you. There would have been a couple of people in a phone box in Texas. But now there are millions of people around discussing the Constitution, talking to their neighbours about it, and talking to their kids about it. And as I say, this is 1773 of the Revolution. This is the beginning of a long process. So you're right, the youth are crucial, but you guys know what's going on. It is your duty to educate those youth, because you sure as hell the school system ain't going to do it.